Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at Apple. We've got this analyst report, really interesting stuff packed with financials, recent earnings, and even some insights into Apple's future. And the big question we're looking at is, how did Apple just have a record-breaking quarter, but this report still calls the stock overvalued?
Yeah, the market is always trying to predict future performance.
Right.
So sometimes,
Looking ahead.
exactly.
So, okay, let's break this down, starting with some good news. Apple brought in a massive $124.3 billion in revenue just in the first quarter of 2025. That's a 4% jump year over year.
It is impressive, but that growth is slower than what we've seen from Apple in the past, and that's what has some analysts worried.
Okay, so Wall Street really likes momentum. Even with record revenue, if the growth slows down, investors get spooked.
Yeah.
What about those record earnings per share, though? $2.40 a share, a 10% increase year over year. That's got to be a good sign, right?
Well, you can think of earnings per share, or EPS, as a slice of the company's profit pie. Higher EPS usually means that the company is more profitable, which is good for investors. But this report says that EPS is kind of overshadowed by iPhone revenue, which was basically flat.
Ah, there's the but. I was wondering when we get there. So is the iPhone not doing so well anymore? Are people not as excited about the newest model?
It's not that simple. The report gives a few reasons for why iPhone sales were flat. One is that there's a lot of competition in the smartphone market these days. You've got the big companies like Samsung and all these new companies coming out all the time. They're all fighting for market share.
But it's not like it used to be. When the iPhone first came out, it was really in a category of its own. So what else is going on?
The report also points to the general economy. People are less willing to spend money, especially on expensive things like smartphones when the economy isn't doing well. And then you have China. The report says that revenue from China is down 11% compared to last year.
Wow, 11%. That's a huge drop.
Yeah.
Is Apple losing its grip on the Chinese market?
Well, the situation in China is complicated. The report talks about how competition is really intense there. Chinese phone companies are getting more popular.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they're making phones with features and prices that appeal to Chinese customers.
So it's not just a global thing, but really a very specific battle going on in China. I'm seeing how this is all starting to fit together. Anything else about China?
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. Remember that new AI feature, Apple Intelligence, that Apple has been advertising?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it hasn't launched in China yet.
Wait, hold on. So one of the biggest things Apple has going for it, this game-changing feature that everyone is talking about, is not even available in one of their biggest markets. That sounds like a huge miss.
It is. And the report suggests that this delay could be a major reason for those low iPhone sales in China.
So is this Apple making a mistake here?
Not necessarily. See, this is where you can really see how the market thinks ahead. Even though iPhone sales in China aren't great right now, there could be a good side to this Apple's Intelligence situation.
Okay, I'm listening.
If Apple Intelligence is really popular in China when it finally launches, it could really boost iPhone sales. Pent-up demand combined with a really cool new feature.
Okay, so instead of messing up this delay, could actually create hype and get people excited.
Exactly. But there is a downside. What if Chinese people just aren't interested in Apple Intelligence?
Right.
What if it doesn't live up to all the hype? That's the risk that the analysts are thinking about.
So even with the record revenue and earnings, there's all this tension. The market sees the flat iPhone sales, the drop in the Chinese market, and they're thinking, what if this Apple Intelligence thing doesn't work out?
Exactly.
And that's why they're saying Apple stock is overvalued, even though the numbers are good. So help me understand this overvalued idea. Apple's doing great financially, but the stock is overvalued. How does it make sense?
That's a great question. It gets at how the market decides how much companies are worth. A company doing well right now doesn't always mean that the stock price is a good reflection of how the company will do in the long run. Sometimes the stock price gets too high because of hype or short-term excitement. So in Apple's case, even though their earnings are great, the market might be assuming that Apple will grow a lot in the future. And that might be hard to do, especially with all the uncertainty around the iPhone and the Chinese market.
Okay, so overvalued basically means that the stock price is higher than what some analysts think it should be, because they don't think Apple will be as successful in the future as the current stock price suggests. It's like the market is betting that Apple will hit a home run, but some analysts are saying, hold on, let's see if they even make it to first base.
That's a great analogy. And to make things even more complicated, the report talks about another part of Apple's business that is doing really well. And this could be the key to overcoming these challenges.
Oh, and what would that be?
Their services, Apple Music, Apple TV, plus the App Store, iCloud, all those things that bring in recurring revenue. And they're growing really fast.
That's interesting. I admit I didn't pay much attention to that part of the report. I was so focused on the iPhone numbers.
Mhm.
But you're right. Apple has been really pushing their services lately, and it sounds like it's working out well for them.
It is. And what's really interesting is that services not only give Apple more sources of income, which means they're less dependent on iPhone sales, but services generally have higher profit margins than hardware.
So even if they sell fewer iPhones, they can still make a lot of money, or even more money, from their services. That's a
Yeah.
really smart strategy.
It is. This move towards services is making Apple a more balanced and resilient company in the long term. It's like they have a backup plan in case one part of their business starts to fail.
Okay, so I'm seeing Apple in a whole new light. They're not just a hardware company. They're a big player in the digital services world, too.
Right. And that's really important to think about when you're looking at their stock. It's not just about how many iPhones they sell each quarter. It's about the strength and potential of their entire ecosystem.
Right, it's about the big picture.
Yeah.
Now let's go back to Apple Intelligence for a minute. The report calls it a wild card. Why do you think that is?
Apple Intelligence is more than just a new feature. It's a completely different way for people to use their devices. The report explains that it uses AI in a new and innovative way. It almost feels intuitive. It learns your habits, predicts what you need, and offers solutions before you even realize you need them.
Yeah, I've been using it on my new iPhone 16, and it's pretty amazing. The other day I was planning a trip, and Apple Intelligence popped up with hotel suggestions based on my budget. It even considered the weather forecast.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of smooth, personalized experience that Apple is going for. It's something their competitors are having a hard time copying. This could be a big advantage for Apple if they do it right.
So the report is saying that Apple Intelligence could be a big reason for Apple's future growth, especially if they can get it into the hands of Chinese consumers.
Absolutely. But there are still some big unknowns. Like we were talking about, the launch in China is crucial. But even beyond that, will people really start using this new way of interacting with their devices? Will it actually become something they can't live without?
It's a gamble for sure, but it seems like a gamble Apple is willing to take.
Yeah, and they have the resources to do it. The report mentions that Apple has a ton of cash on hand, like $141 billion in cash and investments. That gives them a lot of flexibility to invest, try new things, and deal with any problems that come up.
That's a nice safety net to have, especially with how uncertain the economy is right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got record earnings, a potentially revolutionary new feature in Apple Intelligence, and a booming services segment. But the report still says the stock is overvalued. I'm still trying to understand that. Can you help me connect the dots?
It all comes down to weighing the potential rewards against the risks and challenges, and the report doesn't ignore those risks. Like we mentioned, the uncertain global economy is a big one, inflation, rising interest rates, the possibility of a recession. These are all things that could really affect how much people spend, and that ultimately impacts Apple's bottom line.
Right. Even a company as big as Apple isn't immune to what's happening in the wider economy.
Exactly. And then there's the competition. It's really tough, and it's coming from all sides. Apple has to keep innovating if they want to stay ahead.
Yeah, that's got to be tough when you're already at the top. It's like trying to improve on something that's already perfect.
Hmm.
What else did the report say about the risks?
They also mentioned supply chain issues that have been affecting the entire tech industry, like shortages of computer chips and geopolitical problems. It's become really hard to manufacture and ship products on time and at a reasonable cost.
Yeah, I've heard about people having to wait months to get their new iPhones and Macs. It's annoying for customers and a problem for Apple. So how do these risks affect that overvalued assessment?
Analysts are looking at all this and saying, what if things don't go as planned? What if iPhone sales don't improve? What if Apple Intelligence fails? What if the global economy takes a hit? There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's why they're being cautious.
Okay, I see the logic there. But the report also mentions that different analysts have different opinions, right?
That's right. It's interesting how different experts can look at the same information and come to different conclusions. Some, like D.A. Davidson, are still optimistic about Apple. They think the stock is priced fairly, considering how much potential Apple has and their history of success.
But others like Jefferies and KeyBank are less sure. They even lowered their price targets for Apple stock. It seems like they're more worried about those short-term challenges and how uncertain Apple's future growth is.
Exactly. They're more focused on the potential downsides. And this difference of opinion is a good reminder that investing is not a perfect science. There's always some risk, some educated guesswork involved. You can't predict the future.
So what does all this mean for someone like me? Someone who's just trying to understand what's going on with Apple and whether it's a good investment. What should we make of all this?
That's the big question, isn't it? And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. But there are some key takeaways from our discussion. First, Apple is a complicated company with both strengths and weaknesses. They're not just about the iPhone anymore. Their services segment is huge, and innovations like Apple Intelligence could be game changers.
But there are also big challenges. Competition, a shaky global economy, and that big question mark hanging over Apple Intelligence. It's a mixed bag.
It is, and that overvalued rating reflects that mix of good and bad. It's a sign to be careful, do your own research, and make an informed decision based on your own investment goals and how much risk you're willing to take. Don't just blindly follow the hype.
Great advice. I feel like I understand Apple a lot better now. It's not just about their gadgets. It's about a company trying to navigate a complicated and constantly changing world, facing both exciting opportunities and big challenges. It's a fascinating story, and one I'll definitely be following.
Me too. And that's one of the best things about investing. It's not just about making money. It's about understanding the forces that are shaping the world around us.
I like that. So before we wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the key question is this. Will Apple's services segment and innovations like Apple Intelligence be enough to overcome the problems in their core hardware business? That's something for you all to think about. The answer will probably determine what happens to Apple in the next few years. It is a good question to think about. It makes me want to look back at Apple's history and see if there are any clues there.
Yeah. Apple has always been changing, right? From personal computers to the iPod to the iPhone, and now services.
Exactly.
And every time people doubted that they could pull it off. But Apple proved them wrong again and again. It's a pretty amazing track record.
It is impressive, but things change so fast in the tech world. The competition is intense, and customers always want something new. Apple can't just sit back and relax. They have to keep innovating if they want to stay on top.
Which brings us back to your question. Can Apple's services and innovations like Apple Intelligence really make up for slower hardware sales? What do you think?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think Apple has some things going for them. First, they have a huge and loyal customer base. Millions of people around the world are already using Apple products and services, so it's easier for them to get people to try their new
Well,
services.
like they already have a market ready for whatever they come up with.
Exactly. Second, Apple is really good at making things that are easy and enjoyable to use. They don't just focus on the technology itself, they think about how people will actually use their products and services. And they make sure it's intuitive and fun.
I think that's a big reason why people like Apple. They take complicated technology and make it something anyone can understand.
Exactly. And third, Apple has a lot of money to invest. They can put money into research and development, they can explore new markets, and they can buy promising startups. They have the resources to stay ahead of the curve, to try new things, and to take risks that other companies just can't.
So even though there are challenges, they're not exactly helpless. They have a lot of tools at their disposal.
Right. But it's not going to be a walk in the park. The competition is fierce, and the stakes are high. We'll have to wait and see if Apple can keep being successful in this ever-changing tech world.
Well said. This has been a really interesting deep dive into Apple. We've talked about record earnings, the challenges of a slowing iPhone market, the potential of services, the wild card of Apple Intelligence, and that big question of whether the stock is truly overvalued.
It's been great to discuss this complicated and fascinating story with you.
We want to thank all of you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and interesting.
Remember, investing is a journey, not a destination. It's about learning, adapting, and making smart decisions based on your own goals and how much risk you're comfortable with.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Apple, please subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you don't miss future episodes. We have more exciting stock analyses coming soon, and we're looking forward to sharing them with you.
Thanks for listening.